Hello, this is Andrea Hendricks. The topic of this lesson is to show you some terminology that we encounter in describing angles. And we're going to look at angles really from a different perspective. If you studied angles in middle school and high school, you're looking at the set of points that are formed by two rays. Really, when we're talking about angles now in trig, we're talking about truly the size of the opening. We talk about one of these rays being an initial side, so we can think of that as really a fixed side. It's not going to move. And this terminal side is, if we think about how far we open and where we're ending, is the terminal side. So this is the side that you can kind of visualize moving as you change the opening of the angle. And the vertex point is the point that connects those two rays together. So the standard way that we look at angles when we study them in trig is we put them on a coordinate system. And the standard position puts the initial side on the x-axis and the vertex is centered at the origin. And then the terminal side is the side that moves around. So right now I have it fixed and the terminal side is in the first quadrant, but envision it could be in the second quadrant, the third quadrant, the fourth quadrant, and actually it can come all around, and I'm going to illustrate that in just a minute. But the initial side is always on the x-axis, and again it's fixed. The vertex is at the origin, and the terminal side is the end of the opening of that angle. Now we can measure or really draw angles in two ways. We can move them in a counterclockwise motion, which is actually the standard way we do that. And when we move them in a counterclockwise motion, we have a positive angle. If we move them in a clockwise direction, that is a way to describe a negative angle. Coterminal angles are angles that share the same initial and terminal sides, and I'll show you how you can have angles that are coterminal. So here we have a set of axes. So let's say that I have my initial side is here. And now I'm going to draw a terminal side. So this particular angle, oops, let me get that off of there, has a representation where the terminal side is in the first quadrant. We can move counterclockwise to get a positive angle, but notice we could also move clockwise and come up with another angle that has the same initial side and the same terminal side that is negative. Now another thing that we can do, and we'll talk about the specific measures of these in just a moment, is we can start from the x-axis and we can rotate around an entire time and come back to an angle where we end in the same place that this terminal side initially was. So we've made an angle that has one full rotation of the circle and coming back around. So those two angles are coterminal. So right now we have three different angles that we're looking at on this coordinate system. We have the angle that's opening up in the first quadrant, and that's in fact less than 90 degrees. We have an angle that is a negative angle, and then we have an angle that is a rotation around. Okay, so all three ways we can represent this one particular angle. So one other thing I think that's important to note here is that we can talk about acute and obtuse angles. If you have an acute angle, the terminal side is in the first quadrant, and you might remember what acute means from your study of angles before. Acute was less than 90, less than a right angle. Okay. And obtuse was between 90 and 180, right? So here If you think about this as being a right angle with the x and y axis, 180 would be laying flat, right? So obtuse would mean that the terminal side is in quadrant 2. And that's because its measure is between 90 and 180. And we'll talk more about some of those in the next video.